What's up, gamers? Yoshi here, and today's video, it's been a long time coming. We got the Warlock armor, exotic armor tier list. I haven't been pumping out any videos for the past year or so, mostly because I've just been busy with life stuff, and I haven't really seen a need to do the exotic armor tier list because the game has been just fluctuating up and down. Now, since we've got this long season, and we got a couple of months until the final shape drops, I think it's a pretty good time period to be putting out some exotic tier lists. I'm probably not going to do a hunter or a titan one, but since I am a warlock main, I'm going to do the warlock exotic tier list. I also probably will pump out a weapon tier list just because I love making those long videos where I just talk and talk and talk about the exotics. For this one, I've gotten rid of the F tier because I just felt like there's too many tiers to go through, and it was just kind of just condense it a little to give the tiers a little bit more meaning. S tier, of course, is our OP tier. A is slightly not as OP, but really desirable. B is almost your okay now, or average. C is below average now. It's feels like a niche purpose, but something I wouldn't run. D is completely avoid this. It's something I would just not even bother running. Most of my perspective here is going to be for GM content, so Grandmasters for the Nightfalls, for raids, for master raids, master content. I know that pretty much all of these exotics would be good in just base level vanilla content, but for a lot of people who are playing this game, base content is just super trivial. It does not even matter what types of exotics you're running, exotic weapons, types of armor, your build, yada yada. Really, when you get into higher tier content is where tier lists really matter to you, because you're going to be looking for what is the meta, what do I want to be running, so I'm not dying all the time, so I'm getting my abilities back faster and whatnot. So first up, we've got the helmets. So I'm going to cover the helmet exotics. So we got quite a few now since the last time I've done this exotic tier list. We're going to start up with the base DLC exotics. So first up, we have Nezarec Sin, still an extremely good exotic helmet. The only downside to this is you're forced to use void weapons, and in certain types of content where champions still exist, if we're locked into using a void weapon that isn't very good, or isn't very good for PvE in general, like a void pulse rifle, I really don't want to use a void pulse rifle in GMs because they just kind of are stinky. I would rather use a void auto rifle or a void SMG, if anything, or maybe a void scout, but even scouts are not super great. Pulses are slightly better than scouts in my opinion, but I still don't really enjoy running void pulse rifles unless I'm running graviton lance maybe, but that's one one of the exotic void pulse rifles that I would even be running with Nez. But Nez is still extremely useful. You don't even have to be running a Void subclass in order to get your ability generation back. You could run Solar and run Nez and be using a Void weapon. I think a lot of people forget about that. I'm going to put Nez B. It's not absolutely undesirable, but it's not something I would consider OP right now, especially when I look at the usage rates and I see other Warlocks, what other Warlocks are running. I don't really see Nezarec Sin too much. Next up, we have Crown of Tempest. Crown of Tempest is actually still pretty good, I think. I think it's maybe a little slept on, although it's kind of been power crept by Fallen Sunstar when we get to that, just because of how Sunstar works with the ionic traces, whereas Crown is just with your ability kills. It works really well with Risk Runner. I liked using Risk Runner and Crown of Tempest back in the day. So arc ability, or Jolt Final Blows increase the recharge rate of your arc abilities and extend the duration of Storm Trance. Yeah, people don't really care about that part, but it's really about your ability looping. People care a little bit more. And because you have a little bit more freedom than Nezarec, but then you're also locked into you have to use an arc subclass. Right now in this season, arc subclasses aren't super hot. Jolt is still pretty good, but I think I'm going to put it in the same category as Nez right now. It's just not super great. It's kind of overshadowed by another helmet piece we'll talk about in a little bit here, and it's just not. I don't know. It just locks you into the arc subclass. So whereas when you're using Nez, I'm pretty sure you're not locked in to a specific subclass with Nez. Nez, yeah, it's just void, damage, kills, increase ability, energy recharge rate. So you don't even have to be using a void subclass with Nez. So I'm gonna put Nez over Crown, but I'm gonna keep them in the same tier. Next up we have Dire Skull. Dire Skull back in the day, amazing. You could get your super back off of one super. So you throw your Nova down, you're wearing Dire, you're playing Gambit, whatever. You kill a wave, you get your super back. Now you're limited to, I think, about 3/4 of your super. If not, the most is probably going to get used like 1/2 of your super back. I really don't think these types of exotics are all too great for Warlocks, mostly because of how easy it is to get your super from other sources, especially if you have like a Tether Hunter on your team. But if you're playing solo, I feel like there's some easier ways to be getting your super back versus just throwing your Nova down, and that's what your exotic piece is like entirely reserved to. Like, think of it if you're playing master content, like your Nova Bomb is gonna kill significantly less ads than it would do in vanilla. In vanilla, you will probably get a ton of super energy back, but if you're in master content, grandmaster content, and what if you're unlucky and there's not a bunch of ads piled up together and whatnot, you're not going to get as much energy back. I think you're really limiting your playstyle. There are just way better exotics to be using that just helps your neutral game out better, your passives, whatnot. I think Dire really, I think it's kind of is D tier for me. It's just not very desirable. They're just way better exotics to be using. And speaking of your passives and your neutral game here, we have our next exotic here is our Eye of Another World. Eye of Another World buffs your passive ability gains. However, just because it grants you free passives to get your ability stat distributions a little bit higher, I still don't think it's even worth it to run. Just with how easy it is these days to just get well-rolled armor and spec into the abilities you want, and how good the perks are these days on our certain legendary weapons that allow us to get ability energy faster, I just think you're just wasting your passive and neutral game on exotic like Eye of Another World. You'd be so much better off, like, take a Osteomancy build with the cold snaps and your double turrets. With Osteomancy, you just throw your grenade down into a pack of enemies. As long as it's chaining between enemies, you're going to get your grenade back like almost instantly. With Eye, it doesn't have that type of ability regen. It's just a flat base increase. So you're still waiting on your abilities to come back, albeit they do come back faster. It's just there are faster ways of getting your abilities to regenerate in the game now. It's just kind of been overshadowed. And for that, I wouldn't say it's completely useless. It's not like D tier, so it's definitely like C tier for me. So I definitely hold it a little bit higher than Dire Skull. Next, we have Stag. Stag is really like, I know it increases your DR while you're in a rift, but there's just better ways to increase your DR. For example, just having 100 resilience and then, flexing onto another exotic that just provides you more ability, like usage or something like that. Even like standing next to a frozen target with the fragment, stasis fragment on, take less damage next to frozen or frozen targets or crystals. I don't think Stag's really working. Yeah, okay, it's cool. It drops a rift on your death, but like, how useful is that? Especially if you're playing GM content and the rift runs out, and because it's not safe to run over to your body. The rift is not going to save anyone in a GM content, because in GM content you can still get one shot out of rifts and whatnot, even if it is a stag rift. So honestly, I think it's D tier. Next, we have Apotheosis Veil. Apotheosis, you get all your abilities back very quickly after you pop your super. I think it's good if you're running like Warlock or like a one and done super. However, its overall usefulness is like the only benefit you get is when you cast your super. And if you don't have your super, then Apotheosis is like just doing nothing for you. I still think the kind of like the damage, kind of like damage crafting things you can do though with Warlock or with the Strand Super and just throwing like a ton of Threadlings can actually do insane amounts of damage, as what I've heard, but it's just not like super desirable just because of the other better exotics that exist in this tier list. So I'm thinking Apotheosis for me is just sitting in C tier. Next, we have Verity's Brow. Verity's, I think, is an extremely good exotic helmet still. I don't know if it's S tier per se, but I do like running it and a lot of end game content just because of how beneficial it is to your teammates and just how easy it is. As long as you're matching your subclass with a matching subclass weapon and you're getting kills with that subclass weapon, then you're benefiting from the death throws. When you throw your grenade, it benefits your allies and boosts their grenade charge rate. I don't know if it's like, it's not super S tier because it still relies on you getting kills. And if you're in GM content where it's a little bit harder, albeit to get kills, I mean, it's still, you can make it work for sure in GM content, and contest content as well. It's just, I don't know. I think for me, it's just not just an S tier. If anything, it's like S minus or A plus. But Verity's, I think, is an extremely good exotic. Next, we have our Blinky Boy exotic. It's our Astrocyte Verse. Honestly, I think it's just useless for PvE. Like, Blink is not like a super great jump in PvE to begin with. Definitely do some like challenges with just blinking. But even though it can create volatile effect from those affected by the blink, it's just really, it's really a PvP exotic. It's not for PvE. So I'm just putting it at the bottom of D tier here. Next, we have Fellwinter's Helm. Not to be confused with Fellwinter's Lie. Fellwinter's Helm, pretty solid. It's fun running with Void builds for sure, especially when you can make your Void finishers make you invisible, and then the Void finishers also cast like the explosive effect, and then you have the Fellwinter's Lie or Fellwinter's Helm effect on it over it. But then finishers, you can just make the fragments do what Fellwinter's Helm does. Albeit Fellwinter's Helm, you can pull off some nasty like damage stacking with it because of how the debuff works. And if you finish like a major next to the boss, and when you finish the major, it creates that weakening effect onto the boss, so you can do bonus damage to the boss. I definitely used Fellwinter's Helm when I did my solo flawless of Duality. It helped me just edge out more damage against Kaido. But nowadays, Void's not super hot this season because we're so loaded on Strand, Stasis, and Solar for this season. I don't know if that's going to change, though, in the final shape. But right now, Fellwinter's is not too hot. But I think when used with the right builds and the right teammates, I think it definitely can succeed. It definitely offers some good utility. However, I feel like putting it into B tier is a little too generous for it. So I'm going to stick it in C tier for right now, but the top of C tier for sure. Next, we've got Fallen Sunstar. Fallen Sunstar, honestly, even though we're in a season of Solar and not Arc, I'm going to put it in S tier just because of how good it is for getting your abilities back and allowing your allies to get your ability back. I know it locks you into the Arc subclass for an exotic like this, but come on. It's just, when you're running this thing, it's just so good for getting, if you're running like a Jolt grenade build, it's like so good for getting that stuff back. The Ionic Traces are pretty cracked still. Even though we're not in like an Arc season, I still think Fallen Sunstar is just extremely good. Its utility is just really good for just chaining abilities back to back. I think Jolt is still pretty good, even though Jolt got nerfed. Jolt is still really good. The Arc subclass is still really good. Fallen Sunstar is really good for looping abilities. I definitely think it's not something to discount. Putting it above Verity's brow though. Like Verity's requires you like Sunstars just like get arc kills while amplified or whatever. Or let's double check that. Yeah, ionic creatures you create move faster and grant you additional ability energy. Nearby allies also gain ability energy when you collect an ionic trace. So it doesn't really require you to use a certain weapon. It just requires you to have a way of creating ionic traces. You can make ionic traces more frequently if you're amplified. It's just like, I mean, you pick up 3 traces and you pretty much get your class ability back. And if you're like spamming the turret, you know what I mean, the arc turret, the arc buddy, excuse me, then it's pretty good for just jolting and getting yourself amplified or getting the ionic traces. Even in master content, like the arc buddy still does like a significant amount of damage. It's nothing to like frown about or like hate or whatnot. It's a little harder to stay alive as arc, I think, depending on like how good you are at the game, for sure. Putting it above Verity's brow right now, I think maybe I'm gonna get some flack for that. So I think Sunstar is probably just like A tier right now. I don't know if it's above Verities or it's like on the same level of Verities, but it's definitely up there for me. Fallen Sunstar. Next we have Dawn Chorus. Dawn Chorus for this season, pretty hot. I think it's kind of slept on, if anything, just because of I know everyone's like dick riding Sunbracers right now, and rightfully so. But with Dawn Chorus, if you're using Dawn Blade, it can net you some crazy damage against bosses, and just it buffs your scorch damage and whatnot. I mean, it's the neutral passive gains for incandescent and scorching is pretty decent. Dawn Chorus S tier for me, just because of how cracked the super is. Dawnblade is with it. It's just so freaking fun to use. You do so much damage, and the super lasts forever. So it's pretty awesome, especially with the artifact mods available this season. Future seasons, I don't know if it's going to be S tier anymore for sure, or our future episodes or whatever. But right now, I really like Dawn Chorus. Next up, we have Sento. Sento, honestly, like hands down S tier. It's free heavy for the rest of your team. As long as you're marking those mini boss targets for your allies and they kill the mini boss target, it creates you special, so you get more ammo for your trace rifle, and it creates them heavy. And the bonus thing is if you have a marked target and someone's using Aeons and they finish that mini boss with Aeons, it creates heavy for you. Okay, of course, if they're running the Aeons perk. It creates heavy for you, heavy for them, special for you. Awesome. We used Sentos when we did Crota for the challenge. Like super easy, heavy. It's like so free. It's crazy. Even in like Onslaught, honestly, I wouldn't really use an Onslaught right now, but still I've seen a lot of people requesting for a Sento, so I think Sento is still pretty good for that. But yeah, anything that makes free heavy, well, like to a certain degree, it's free heavy. Very desirable to have, especially if you're running with teammates. By yourself, though, I don't know if Sento is that great. Maybe if you're running like Cold Heart and you're doing like a build where you technically never have to reload with Cold Heart and just does a ton of damage. I think by yourself, Sento loses its value, but in a fire team, Sento is pretty. I know I'm calling it Sento. It's Sentoff, but I call it Sento, just because the first 5 letters, 4 letters, whatnot. But Senos, yeah, pretty good. S tier for me. Next up, we got our gauntlets here. Sunbracers, you already know where they're going to be. Sunbracers are instant S tier. It's so easy to create a Sunbracers build where you get your, you proc heat rises, you're jumping or floating in the air, you're getting kills while floating in the air, you get your melee back, you use your finger snap, you get infinite grenades for a period of time. You can proc heat rises again with your grenade if you run out of heat rises. But really, you should have infinite. If anything, you're scorching everything. You're killing everything. You can use the fragment that solar grenades cure you all the time. It is just so incredibly good for ad clear, sometimes for boss damage, for creating ignites, whatnot, for just killing everything in the room. It's like it's pretty much like war mine cells now with like it's just fire everywhere. They're awesome. Next up, we have Karnstein's. Karnstein's also S tier. It is so easy to get a finisher kill, give yourself restoration times 2. All you have to do is run this and then run Imperium on your fragment slot, and you can keep restoration forever as long as you're running a solar gun. And yeah, okay, you're locked to solar or whatever, but like, come on, let's be real here. Warlock is like still triple S tier for endgame content. Whether or not Prismatic changes that and the final shape is really up to the final shape, but Well is still just such an incredibly good subclass super. Karnstein's like it's such a free pick to have constant restoration. I just really like having that time. It's free. It's so easy to get a finisher as well. You chip an enemy down, finisher status, finish it, you get ×2 restoration for like 5 seconds. And then Imperium, you can boost with fragments, you can boost it up to like 10-15 seconds. It's such an insane exotic to have right now. Next up, we have Winter's Guile. Winter's Guile, let's be real here. It's just melee on a Warlock build, even if you're using a glaive, like I've used them, they just suck. They're not good. So Winter's Guile, D tier. I think I'm also gonna put Claws in there real quick. It's a D tier. Like, yeah, you get an additional melee charge, but at the cost of what? Like, oh, your charged melee blows, it has intrinsic heavy-handed. It's like, who cares? Like, Warlock melees are you could run double snaps or something, but like, you could just use heat rises to get your snap back. It's a waste, honestly. It's just kind of like a gimmick thing. Like, even to call it a gimmick thing is not even like good enough. Next up, we have Aeons. Aeons S tier. For your team, it's S tier. For you, it's probably not as good to just run solo. So I think I'm just going to demote it to A tier because of that. I know Seno, like, it's not a solo thing either, but Aeons really you only benefit when running it with a team. You're really not going to see much benefit running it solo. I just think there are better options to be running if you're running solo content, like solo endgame content. But, creating heavy for your teammates, who doesn't like heavy? It requires a little more finickiness than Senos. Senos is just kind of like point shoot. Your teammates do the rest of the work for you. Aeons, you got to get the finisher kill. But, the other Aeon, like, cult traits, I just don't think are super great running solo. But just that the fire team support that you can potentially create, I think just leaves it at A tier for me. Ophidians, I'm just going to put, increase handling and reload speed. Who cares about that in endgame content? It's not going to matter. You're going to want other things that help you do other get your abilities faster, whatnot. It's not good. Moving on, we have Controverse Hold. Controverse Hold, I think, is Void Vortex grenades are still really, really good. And Controverse, even though it's been nerfed over the years, I think Controverse is still, it's really good. It's a really good solo exotic, Esoteric runs them all the time. You like them or you hate them. He's using Controverse, and Controverse are just free. Honestly, I feel pretty good putting them at S tier. Next up, we have Getaways. Getaways create you the Arc Buddy. The Arc Buddy shoots faster. However, if you didn't realize already, and you have the aspect that gives you you put your Rift down, it gives everyone the Arc Buddy. If you get amplified, it just makes the Arc Buddy into the Getaways version of Arc Buddy. I think these are more of like a PvP exotic, just because of some of like the stuff you can do with Getaways in PvP and PvE. Honestly, just use the aspect that gives you the Arc Buddy. Why are you consuming your grenade to get the Arc Buddy? Necrotics, I want to say like A tier. S tier, sometimes it's a little bit harder to notice the poison just because of how beefy certain enemies are. But, if you get the poison chaining, it's really good. However, the only guns you're really benefiting off of Necrotics, in my opinion, are Necrochasm, Osteo, and Thorn, and, Weapons of Sorrow. Necrochasm, not super great. and end tier end game content. Osteo, very good and end game content. However, Osteo is not going to fit every role and every GM and every contest thing, especially since it takes an exotic slot. Necrotics, I think, not S tier, definitely not B tier. When paired with Osteo, very good. Ad clearing, ad slaying. Although I feel like A tier is a little too generous just because of like how gimmicky the build is in a way. It's just Osteo right now. I just think there are just better builds right now to be running over Osteo, especially with how strong some of the artifact mods are this season. With just when you are Radiant and you get a precision headshot kill with a solar weapon while Radiant, it can cause the target to ignite. Like, that's just so much freer than spreading poison with Necrotics and Osteo in a build like that. Next up, Nothing Manacles, extra scatter grenade. You know what I'm gonna say about that. It's just easier to run other, like, if anything, I would just run I have another world over Nothing Manacles to get faster grenade energy. Yeah, I get it. You get 2 grenades, you get 2 scatters, but again, it's like a PvP exotic. It's not really like a PvE focused exotic. Even like Apotheosis, like if you cast your super, you have unlimited scatters for a duration versus Nothing Manacles where your scatters go on cooldown. I don't think it's very desirable. Osteo, you already know it, S tier. Like, Osteos are so absolutely broken. They're so good. I know a lot of people, stasis is hit or miss for them in endgame content, but Osteos are just so free for getting your grenade back so easily and so effortlessly. You just throw a grenade down into a group of ads, change to a bunch of ads, you get your grenade back. You know, S tier. Easy S tier. Easy. Next up, we have Baladors. I think to put it in D tier, like, it offers you some utility and some damage stacking, like theory crafting, but Baladors is so incredibly like niche and fills such an incredibly niche role that honestly you're just better off running anything else than Baladors right now. And then lastly, for the gauntlets, we have Briarbinds. Briarbinds, pretty decent, just so you can spam like a shit ton of the child of the old gods. However, it's like you have to still go to your child and pick it up. Yeah, you go to your child and you pick it up and you throw your child again. And, you know, if there's a bunch of ads around your child, you're not going to go pick them up because you're going to get absolutely destroyed. Maybe in a master Nightfall, I would use this, or like dungeon or something like that, or like a normal level raid. I would use Briarbinds. In a master raid, Briarbinds, I don't know about that. I would rather just run like Osteo or Sunbracers or something like that. So I think that's where it lies with me. Next up, for the chess piece, we have Starfire Protocol, everyone's favorite. Although Fallen from Grace now with the nerfs, the changes, I think still pretty solid. It's just a lot of these other exotics just kind of do it better. I think B tier is fair for Starfire. It's still like decent. You know, you can still get your fusion grenades back pretty quickly. It's just, it's not what it once was. It's technically, with Apotheosis, you can make it better than Starfire's. But Starfire, like, at least Starfire, you don't have to have your super up. Like, as long as you have an Empowering Rift or a well down, you can benefit off of it. With Apotheosis, like, you have to cast your super to get any benefit off of it. So Starfire, I think B tier is fair for Starfire. Wings, it's so incredibly niche. You're not going to be wanting to be in the air. I get it. You get 50% increased DR while in the air, and you can pair it up with Manticore or whatever. But, like, let's be real here. If you're in the air and endgame content, you're going to get shot down so quickly by ads. It's not desirable whatsoever. Next up, we have Phoenix Protocol. I think S tier. I think some people might be sleeping on it because of how good it still is. Well, it's such a good super And the fact that you can get 3/4 of your super back using Phoenix Protocol and people just have to get kills inside your well, that I'm sold. I've been using it in Onslaught, have teammates using it in Onslaught, they pretty much get their super back like instantly. Next up, Chromatic Fire. I don't think Chromatic is that good. I've tried to like kind of make it work, but it's just so, the effects are just so not good. You're just better off using like an Ignite build or using like Volt Shot or something. It just can't do what the subclass verbs do or what the subclass verbs can offer you. Chromatic just can't do for you like well enough. Vesper, I think is still good. It's not as good since we're not in an arc artifact season, but I think its neutral game is still really good. I've seen some like good Glaive Vesper builds where you can kind of like you can spam your rift and just have like a lot of survivability in your rift and get your rift back like really quickly. I know it's kind of weird putting it in B tier, but based off of my personal use with Vesper, I think it's kind of like, I think it's pretty good. At my personal opinion, I think it's pretty good. I'm going to put it in B tier. A lot of you may think it belongs in C or D tier, but based off of my personal use with it and running like deep dives with it and running like the tier 7 deep dives with it, like it's pretty fun to use. Although, albeit we're not in a season where Arc really benefits from any of the artifacts currently on our list available to us, you might consider putting Vesper lower, but I really like it, so I'm going to put it in B tier. Sanguine, come on, like Sanguine D tier. Also, Storm Dancer's Brace, D tier. These exotics are just not good for endgame content. I don't care. It's like the issue is Storm Dancer's Brace is also like Dire. Yes, the more kills you get with Tickle Fingers, the more damage it does. But like, let's be real here. Stormcaller, like I think Chaos Reach is the better option than using Storm Trance in endgame content. It's still very good for ad clearing for sure, but like just use Crown of Tempest for crying out loud. Use Crown of Tempest or Fallen over Storm Dancer's Brace. Your neutral game and your passive genning will be so much better running these two exotics over just running this one. Mantle, pretty solid. If you don't like using your super, it's pretty solid. Grants you 4 stacks of a surge to whatever weapon type you're matching it to, if it matches your subclass. I think nowadays I would really just encourage people to spam their super just because of how easy it is to get your super back by just doing damage and picking up orbs and whatnot. And yeah, I get it. Mantle can technically get you your super back faster if you're matching your energy weapons to your subclass type. It gives you like slightly more super energy. It's such a marginal benefit that I think, again, I'm falling back on the passive and your neutrals. Like, I just think it's better to buff your passive and neutrals of your abilities and getting your abilities back faster than it is to get your super back faster and also have like the surge damage benefit when you're at max super. Like maybe if you're running like a boss damage build where you don't cast your super, but nowadays like for most bosses you're gonna want to just cast your super, just with how like the damage meta is right now. So I think Mantle for me is just kind of sitting at C tier. And then last but not least, we have our boots. The boot exotics are booties. T-steps, transversive steps, makes you sprint, slide, crouch, walk faster, reloads your weapons while you're sprinting. Desirable for endgame content unless you're speedrunning. Yeah, that's a no for me. Lunafactions, albeit not as good as the Glory Days for sure, where it would just auto reload your weapons and you could just shoot forever without reloading. Having a fast reload, I think it's very situational for the type of boss you're going for. It's definitely like an exotic you could hot swap to and then swap off of it. I think it can be good in that regard. However, for its like neutral game and the passive it offers you, bonus reload speed and extending the range of weapons if you're in like an empowering or radiance, like I just don't think it's good enough. Like a hot swap exotic though, I think pretty good. Like A tier hot swap exotic, but like by itself, I think it's like C tier. Geomags, I think C tier. They were so good when you could get that bonus energy. You top off your super energy. But let's be real here, that was so absolutely broken back in the day. Like even for PvP, I used to use Geomags in trials. I would use T-steps and then swap off to Geomags to get my super, and then swap back to T-steps or whatever after I was done with the super. Definitely not as good anymore. That's for sure. Like, yeah, it extends your chaos reach as long as you're doing damage to a boss target, but it's like, yeah, again, I'm falling back on your neutral game, your passive. It's like it's not doing anything for you there. Prometheum Spur, even with the rework, Prometheum Spur is just bad. It's just you're not benefiting from it. It almost hurts you to be using it with just how it works. Next up, we have Boots of the Assembler. Boots, I think, are still pretty good, especially when paired with Lumina. Just healing people, having like a team player to heal. I don't think they're super strong by yourself. It's really a team player exotic. Boots of the Assembler by yourself, I don't think you're gonna get a lot of mileage off of it. I would take Boots and run like a Lumina build over Geomag for sure. Like Boots are just more fun, way more fun. Just a little more like movement to play around with for sure. Secants, the filaments, I don't think are very good at all. Like I get it, you get overload rounds in your rift or whatever, and you can get like Devour or whatnot, but there's just so many better options right now to be getting what filaments offers you that you're just better off running like anything else. Rain of Fire, I think Rain of Fire is actually pretty good. Just reloading all your weapons on an air dodge is pretty nice, especially for like certain damage techniques. If you're running like Mythoclast with this, free Radiant for one, and then you can like run Surges as well to make Mythoclast even better. I think it's pretty strong in that regard for sure. And then you can run it with like a, what's it called? The craftable solar linear fusion from Val. I can't remember its name, escapes me, but you can run that as your heavy, so you can have a fusion rifle and a linear fusion and really benefit off of Rain of Fire. I think its neutral game is just really good, especially if you're running something like Mythoclast. I know it requires you to run Mythoclast, but Mythoclast, if you have it, is just super good in PvE. So I mean, without it, yeah, you're definitely it's definitely sucking for sure, but with it, it's pretty good. Rain of Fire with Mythoclast, pretty good. Having Radiant right now is like pretty strong. So especially with the artifact mods, as I've said before in this video. And last but not least, we have Swarmers. Swarmers, I definitely think are A tier. I've been messing around with Swarmers with a couple of strand builds. Just Threadlings are just so good. I mean, I know they're not as good, but they're still good to have. It's free like chaos, free damage for making things like severed and whatnot, and getting targets to be severed or have the severed debuff, and just with how the Warlock kit is for Strand, Swarmers are just they're pretty good, even for like end game content. Like I've definitely used some in like solo master, like lost sectors, whatnot. I've used them in dungeons and raids. They're pretty fun to use, Swarmers. So Strand is still very good. I know they're not like the strongest exotic for sure, but this is my personal tier list. So, and personally, I really like Swarmers. I really like using them in certain like amounts of endgame content. So I think Swarmers to me are A tier. And yeah, that concludes the exotic tier list. So I know I talked for a little bit, but you know me, my videos for the exotic tier list, I like to talk. I like to rationalize why I put certain exotics in certain places. I know I haven't been posting, but Destiny isn't my life. I don't make any money from these videos. I just gotta do them for fun. And if I'm not having fun with making videos, I'm not gonna make videos. So hopefully whoever watched this, if anyone's watching this at all, I hope you enjoyed the content. Give me a like, subscribe to my dead channel, be my guest, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.